Movie-licensed video games, a constant mixed bag in the community. Some held a place near and dear to our hearts, while most of them were forgettable, lackluster, and pointless, to the point where you wondered why the game was made to begin with. Back in the day, the safest bet was always the Star Wars franchise, one that provided fully detailed games that excelled in immersion, gameplay, and overall functionality. My personal favorite was the Star Wars Battlefront series by Pandemic Studios, for replicating large-scale battles on various planets and in space, along with various characters from the original and prequel film trilogies. There are many reasons as to why these two titles were insanely popular, one of which being that they were able to achieve so much and were ahead of their time despite being released in the early 2000s. But in 2008, when EA Games, notorious for eating up smaller companies and spitting out the bones, bought Pandemic and then shut down the studio within a short time period, laying off 1,500 people in the process. To make matters worse, EA then earned the rights to release Star Wars games in 2013 from Disney, and started by releasing their own Battlefront reboot, only to be relentlessly mocked and mercilessly criticized by gamers for releasing a buggy, unplayable game that was also filled with disgusting loot boxes that essentially encouraged kids to gamble. This, alongside EA's arrogance, unwillingness to admit fault, and corruption, solidified the company's reputation as the worst company in America. Since then, nothing has changed, and they've since struggled to live down what is now known as one of the biggest gaming flops in history. But in another attempt to win fans over, EA developed a new Star Wars title last year that puts you in the pilot seat of classic ships and allows you to engage in various dogfights across the galaxy, something I can only dream of back then. Is this title a diamond in the rough, or is it another abysmal flop by EA Games? Let's go into hyperspace and find out right here on Prime Reviews. Star Wars Squadrons is a first-person fictional dogfight simulator by EA Games, a title that takes you into the vast and open universe filled with familiar classics like X-Wings, TIE Fighters, and several other ships alongside tons of alien-like characters. One thing players can never take away from EA would be their graphic and sound design, being flawless as always. You feel as if you're flying an X-Wing into battle, with all the sounds and sights familiar to those who have seen the films. Characters communicate with you during dogfights with banter and tactics, explosions and blasters sound and feel realistic, on top of the graphics being top-notch with appropriate lighting and other textures. The soundtrack, although not composed by John Williams, does the game justice as well and adds to the dogfights. The authenticity of this game is perhaps the best part about it, making players feel as if they've entered a portal into the Star Wars universe. Wow. Authentic. This is cool. This is epic! Despite EA's horrible track record with Star Wars games, this one shows drastic improvements within minutes of playing it. Bugs seem non-existent, as well as no microtransactions whatsoever. You did good here, EA. You did good. The story mode itself allows players to switch between two customizable characters, one from the Rebels and the other from the Empire, showing both sides of the Galactic War. At first, upon seeing this, you feel ecstatic because custom character creation adds to the immersion exponentially. But that is until you realize that's not the case at all, and that you can only choose a couple or so pre-made designs, body types, and faces. I really wish the customization was a bit more thorough instead of presenting the bare minimum. Ask yourself this: is it really character customization if everything is pre-made for you? I personally disagree. You'll notice quickly, however, that gameplay was the main focus for EA here. The story itself starts out in a way that keeps you invested, but as time goes on, you slowly realize that the story isn't the main attraction and is void of any depth. It's pretty clear that EA wanted to show off and use their so-called story and character creation as a base foundation to give the gameplay purpose. Which leads me to the main attraction, gameplay. While it takes a second to get the hang of the navigation and controls, flying these classic vessels are a blast. Well, for a select period of time. What I like about it is that each ship has their own set of weapons, defense mechanisms, designs, and more. Players can also use control panels within each ship to divert the ship's power to lasers, shields, and boosters, or to equally distribute power to all three. The interior of each model is authentic and stays true to the franchise, again with all the sound effects and designs to match. Players are also able to connect their PlayStation VR headset to add to the immersion drastically, by making players feel as if they're sitting in the cockpit. A nice plus for sure. But that is until you play the game for an hour or so and realize there's not much else to offer. In other words, if you've played the first 3 levels, then you've pretty much played the rest of the game. It mainly consists of dogfights with a large side order of boring dialogue, meaningless characters, and lackluster debriefing sessions that detail the mission. Even when you're inside the hangar, you can't walk around and explore, but rather you select a room or door and press a button to be practically teleported there, like some mediocre point-and-click flash game you'd find on kids' websites like Neopets. Okay, let's move. I'm trying to move forward. Why am I looking up? Oh. I see. I have to press X. I felt more or less like a tourist than an actual pilot of the rebellion who belonged there. Like it's some kind of Disney-themed attraction. The game clearly shows that all the effort was put into the core gameplay, with everything else seeming to be hardly finished. The characters are static, one-dimensional, and practically offer nothing to the experience besides helping you out a couple times during a skirmish and keeping the so-called story afloat. Same goes for the missions themselves. Either you're fighting enemies, eliminating large enemy ships, or a combination of the two. Each mission feels similar to one another when it comes to the overall campaign. There aren't any levels that truly stand out, at least in my experience. There's also multiplayer, which some would argue is a better feature compared to the story mode, because you're playing against other players and jumping straight into the fights without any of the boring dialogue and mediocre missions. You'll get eaten alive the first few matches by some seasoned veterans, but once you get things going, it can be pretty fun. Unfortunately, there are only 2 different game modes. There's Dogfight, which is a team deathmatch mode that supports 10 players, and Fleet Battles, in which 2 teams of up to 5 players compete to destroy each other's capital ships. Like the campaign, multiplayer can be fun for a certain amount of time, but once you've played for a good hour or 2, you feel like playing something else. EA did well in taking steps towards improvement, however. They have proven that they can listen to feedback and implement it, as well as focusing on making the game immersive and fun for players. Unfortunately, the game barely scratches the surface of what it could actually achieve, and I feel like they could have done more with this game, like planetary exploration with small first-person skirmishes on them, or putting the players in scenarios where they need to provide air support to soldiers fighting on the ground. EA definitely took the right approach here, but it's not enough to keep you entertained. It's not an unfinished game because of bugs or poor design, but because it lacks depth and could have offered more features to players instead of the bare minimum. I liked the game, and was surprised that EA actually did something right for a change. Sadly, it could have been so much more. It's evident that the developers decided against pushing the envelope and thinking outside the box. They played it safe, but to their own detriment. It would have been nice to see what this game could have been, but I guess we'll never know. Want to see the gameplay for yourself? Head on down to my Let's Play channel, Prime Plays, where I post a new video every single Friday. What are you waiting for? Hit the link in the description for fun and entertaining content.